Hi humans, welcome to part one in the Microsoft 365 Defender series. My name is Danny, and I wanted to run through the core components of Microsoft 365 Defender with you in a series and go a little bit deeper into each of the independent components to help you understand how these security solutions can benefit your environment. Today, I want to start with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or MDE. It's my favorite. It's where I started off in the Microsoft Defender for 365 security solutions. It's a follow on from my blog here, which you can see on screen around the M365 Defender solutions. One of my favorite jokes there at one of the breakout sessions at Ignite that I went to, the presenter said, "I own a DeLorean," and an audience member said, "Do you drive it often?" He said, "Only from time to time." One of my favorites, and it's certainly a good start to the Defender journey. Microsoft have a great page here talking about what Microsoft 365 Defender is. And this is very different from Windows Defender antivirus anti-malware. This is advanced security for Microsoft 365. So the core components are listed there. And today we're going to focus on Defender for Endpoint, which Microsoft define as a unified endpoint platform, preventative protection, post-breach detection, automated investigation, and response. It's also referred to as EDR or XDR, enhanced detection and response, or extended detection and response. So rather than me talk more about that and show you web pages, let's launch right into it. So the core of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint started with me back in 2016 at that Ignite breakout session, where we looked at a component there which was there from day one, which was the timeline. And this is what sold me on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So I'm just going to jump across to one of the incidents to demonstrate what that looks like. So when we look at the timeline, the benefit here is that I'm getting a bunch of machine information relating to an incident that's occurred on a computer, the Windows 10 computer in this case, that's been detected, and I can see all of the events both before and after that, not just the suspicious events, but all of the other events that took place on this computer around that time. And this gives me a very, it's a very powerful way to identify what's going on with this computer. So is something that deleted 43 files suspicious? Is PowerShell ISE creating a remote thread in the context of notepad.exe suspicious? And what does that mean? What was the type of tactic? Here's a brief description, whether the file is signed, what the process did, and a bunch of information to help me determine around these events, are these things that I should be concerned about? Was this a real attack? And it's a very quick way of me to get that information to determine, what is going on this computer without having to physically be at that computer. Or to try to remotely grab event logs and pour through, process tree logs and grab forensic packages and try and take that offline. So there's a lot of power in just that capability there to see what's going on this computer around that event. One of the things that Microsoft also had introduced with at the time was Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Day one, was this capability to isolate a device. And the whole point was that if a device had been compromised, and I was concerned that it was going to spread to other devices in my environment, or if the device was outside of the environment, how it was going to be accessed, or other malicious communication that was going to take place, I could isolate this to only be able to communicate with the Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, a cloud service. Very powerful. The stuff that they added a little bit later on, and a lot of this has gone on since the product went from Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection to Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection to now Microsoft Defender for Endpoints. So if you hear those names, hopefully you'll know now that they're all referring to what is essentially now the same solution, but with a lot more capability. So there are a couple of other things that Microsoft also introduced that you can do remotely to devices without actually having to call someone to say, we think your computer's been compromised, please turn it off immediately and send it to us so we can do detailed forensics. So the timeline, fantastic. Investigation package, another good one, so that I can remotely capture information. There's also the capability for me to detonate files within Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to go and submit a file for deep analysis. And what deep analysis does is it goes and picks up that file, detonates it in a Microsoft environment, and tells me everything that file did. So if there's a file that's being executed as part of an attack or what looks like an attack, I can see registry keys, files dropped, websites communicated with, all of those things that'll help me determine the scope of that attack. And while I think the SLA says up to 3 hours, it varies a little bit, but I've had cases where it takes 5 minutes, depending on the executable and how busy the service is as well. But Microsoft have an SLA there, obviously, to help set your expectation. But again, incredibly powerful stuff to help you more quickly determine what's happening with the device, regardless of where it is. This is a cloud service. We don't need the device to be in front of us. Around that time, I think advanced hunting was also there. Someone might correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was there fairly early from day one. And the whole point of advanced hunting was that I could go ahead and see what's happening if a device had, as an example, communicated with a website or an IP address that I thought was malicious. And I wanted to see which other devices in my environment had also done that. Advanced hunting is a way for me to very quickly and easily determine that. And the query that I've copied and pasted here, this uses the Kusto query language, which is there in Log Analytics, and a lot of the other advanced hunting capabilities. I think it's standardized across the advanced hunting capabilities in services like Azure Sentinel as well. So in my case, I'm just looking for this IP address that devices might have connected to within my environment, and it's looking for device network events, and you can see device file events, device logon events, device events. You can see the schema on the left-hand side of the types of things that we can search for on devices. It's found 2 events. The initiating process name, so Notepad is communicated with that IP address, which is a little bit odd. Microsoft Edge has also communicated with that IP address, and it gives me a lot of detail about what's happened. So it's not just, hey, yeah, here's the device or here's the user. It gives me a lot of additional information about what's been happening on that machine. So very useful in determining the scope, blast radius, breadth of an attack or an incident or something that's happened on devices. So next up is threat analytics. And I think this was in there very early on. And I absolutely love this because it really helps me determine the high profile threats and that are out there right now that could be of great concern and how they actually relate to my environment. And this is pretty powerful again to know. And the example I'm going to look at here is this iced ID vector attack type. And we get an overview of what the attack does, how any devices in my environment, how it's affected those devices. Do I have any active alerts in my environment so that I need to be concerned or that relate to this type of attack? And are there any misconfigured devices? So misconfigured in the way that are there any mitigations? We'll have a look at that in just a second. Then we get a detailed analyst report that takes us through the types of things that or the ways that this attack can gain access to an environment. And in this case, phishing, the download, the activity, mitigations, detection details, some advanced hunting queries to help us detect, are we seeing any of these types of behaviors in our environment? So a bunch of stuff there to help me determine and do some additional investigation. So educating me on what this attack means. And as well as suggesting some mitigation. So in my case, to enable local admin password management, this will help protect me against this type of attack. And to also enable network protection. And in the vulnerabilities, it'll show me any trackable vulnerabilities that are associated with this particular threat in my environment. So again, a very, very powerful way for me to see and to protect my environment, to improve my environment against those types of attacks. And one of those, there was another ransomware. It's a pervasive and ongoing threat. A great example of how Microsoft is helping in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to look at mitigations to improve our prevention of of ransomware in our environments. And I think I've focused talking about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on Windows 10 devices. It's not just for Windows 10 devices. So Microsoft are branching out Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to the Microsoft Server solutions, as well as iOS and Android, different capabilities on those platforms, which I think they're trying to get up to the same parity, and also for Mac OS and I believe Linux. So not just a Windows solution anymore. But the threat analytics was, again, early on, one of the things that I just identified with as being incredibly powerful. So at this point, I'm sold. I mean, what a great solution to manage security on my endpoints. And when I saw this in 2016, that's what I felt like. I thought, wow, there's so much visibility and capability here that is missing from my environment right now. And that was back in 2016. And as I mentioned, the capability has gone past just Windows 10 devices, but to Windows Server, Android, iOS, Linux, and Mac OS. So at this point, I'm sold, right? What a great security solution to manage my endpoints. And I mentioned before that it's not just Windows 10, Windows Server, Android, iOS, Linux, and Mac OS that Microsoft are broadening the scope of the solution on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint solution. But there's so much capability there. But we were looking at, yeah, it can detect, but what can we do about those detections? So the investment then into automated investigation was designed to help us to, like we did with Vet Antivirus of 20 years ago, or 30 years ago now, probably, if you remember Vet Antivirus, if you're around. Early on in those antivirus days, we were concerned about the antivirus solution doing more harm than good if it misdetected a particular virus and classified something as a virus that wasn't. Might have lost some data if it deleted files. And we often we did tread very carefully in those early days. And as time went on, AV solutions got better at detecting that and limiting the number of false positives and damage that those solutions did versus the good. So in the same way, when we're looking at behavioral analysis and other more advanced techniques of detecting threats and malware or attacks to my environment, or my endpoints in this case, automated investigation started with let's just look at it and notify you, to now taking a more active approach to let's clean it up. We're more confident about these types of attacks and what they do. Plus, we have a lot more information, and this is what I wanted to show you and why I love the automated investigation detail. We can see, and I'll just get a bit more screen real estate. We can see the summary of this whole investigation. There's a suspicious process injection observed, and we want to know the devices that were involved, the entities that were analyzed. The evidence is probably the key one here, and we saw this also earlier on in the incident in the alert queue when we're looking at the timeline, and we can jump again to those from here. But if I want to know that, okay, do I have a level of confidence as to how far Defender for Endpoint has gone, we can dig down and look at the files that were reviewed. We can look at the processes, the services, the drivers, IP addresses, and the persistence methods that were checked to make sure that this machine has been remediated. And then there's a complete log of everything that this automated investigation has done. So incredibly powerful stuff. I've not done anything here. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has gone and run an automated detection. It's run a response. It's in this case, it's closed off a suspicious process. It's actually halted that process, killed that process off, and it's gone and given me a complete indication of everything that it's done here. So very powerful endpoint detection and response automation. So I just want to pause on the technology for a second and just focus on how Microsoft has gone through the security journey in 2016. And Microsoft will often talk about how security is not just a single partner solution. So there's a lot of integration here, and I just wanted to point this out as we've gone through that Microsoft do have a lot of partner relationships with other security products that integrate with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or that Microsoft Defender for Endpoint integrates with. So some pretty important partnerships there to help fit this solution in with potentially existing solutions, security solutions that you already have. So I'd like to say that's it, because that's a lot in terms of what Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can do to help your environment be more secure, your endpoints be more secure. But one of the best ways to avoid security incidents is to remain up to date and to know where you're at from a patching priority, to know which software or which devices have weaknesses and vulnerabilities to the operating system or to software or to third-party software, because it's always changing, right? Attackers are finding new ways to exploit weaknesses in software. So the whole point of the threat and vulnerability management dashboard and why it's so important is to know how we're trending, to know where our weaknesses are, to know and be able to prioritize. So in here, we're seeing exposure distribution. What are the devices? In my case, I don't have a lot of devices, so they're all high exposure distribution. So I probably want to prioritize on getting those patched pretty quickly. And my score for devices, how I'm looking at the different areas, security controls. I'm looking the best here, but I probably want to focus on some of my application security components because I'm lacking there. Although I may not just use the secure score, it helps me identify where I'm a little bit lacking and where I might want to improve. But the exposure score, once we dig a little bit deeper, and we'll go there in a sec, is an overall way of me determining overall in my environment how I'm looking. Higher is worse in that case. I'm fairly exposed here. I want to reduce my exposure. So that similar secure score concept that we've seen in the past for a lot of Microsoft solutions. And the benefit here is really around security recommendations and remediation. And the security recommendations that we're looking at here, well, number one in that list is Windows 10 software. It's also things that you can do to devices to harden them, that you may be able to do to mitigate the risk of ransomware or a specific type of malware. So what I really like about the threat and vulnerability management security recommendations, and this is also there in software inventory, but this view gives us an indication and it prioritizes for us to say we've got a bunch of weaknesses here, 160 weaknesses, and there are known threats. So that helps me to determine fairly quickly that I probably want to patch those Windows 10 devices as quickly as I can. Probably before I say hit Foxit Reader, even though, or even Mozilla Firefox, better example, even though it has 64 weaknesses, there are currently no known public exploits related to that recommendation. But that might be number 2 on my list because, depending on how many devices that is in my environment, if there is a threat that someone has, there's no known public exploits, but if there is an exploit out there, then I'm vulnerable and I want to jump on that, maybe get Firefox patched pretty quickly. So not just security updates, but also things that we can do, in this case, security controls around attack surface reduction, security controls around BitLocker, and things that I can do, operating system services, change service executable path to a common protected location. So there are a bunch of, I guess, recommendations, best practices that Microsoft are also providing us to help us make the platform, in this case, the OS platform is Windows, to make that platform more secureable and less susceptible to those types of attacks. And if I click on one of those, it'll give me description, potential risk. It'll identify the exposed devices and also some remediation options. So not just telling you that there's a problem that I need to go and investigate, it actually gives me the remediation advice as to how I go ahead and remediate that on my computer. And some of these, if you're integrating with the other Microsoft solutions, such as Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can create a remediation option directly in Microsoft Endpoint Manager so that if you or another team is managing Endpoint Manager, which is previously known as Intune, they can go and say, okay, here's a remediation task, here's the detail, okay, I'll go and update that application, or go and deploy some attack surface reduction rules through Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, integrating with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, I should say. One of the things under software inventory that I wanted to point out here was also the event timeline. So this is important to know how recently these risks or these threats or vulnerabilities, I should say, have come into play. So we can see, when the new vulnerability in Windows 10 became exploitable, impacting one device, and we can get some more detail again about that particular vulnerability and what my related security recommendation is. So a lot of these sections you'll see will interrelate to each other. So if I jump across now to configuration management, I just wanted to quickly look at this. This is an important aspect. I mentioned the integration between Defender for Endpoint and other solutions. One of those is Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And particularly for device attack surface management and attack surface reduction rules. I know there are other ways that you can deploy those attack surface reduction rules, but integrating with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint with Microsoft Endpoint Manager gives me a much easier way to manage and deploy those and to see in the integrated security.microsoft.com page as to how that's impacting my devices, so that before I roll it out, I know what the impact is going to be. So very powerful stuff around attack surface reduction, how many of my devices are onboarded, compliance to Defender for Endpoint baselines, again, baselines indicating what I want my computers to be configured with and how computers are either matching or not matching my preferred baseline. And web protection coverage, which I don't have configured here. And almost finally in this console, I just wanted to show you some of the advanced features in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So some of the capability, and I've talked about integration with other solutions. So, and some of the things that we can turn on, automated investigation being an example that we looked at before, and then enabling endpoint detection and response in block mode rather than just detecting it and alerting to actually be able to block. Relies on those security baselines to automatically resolve alerts again, rather than just alert and review on those alerts, block files, to use custom network indicators. Tamper protection is an important one there, so that malware doesn't turn off the systems that we're using to protect. And also integration with other Microsoft solutions. So Defender for Identity, threat intelligence, cloud app security, secure score, which is pretty important. The Intune connector we talked about. So some very, very important integrations when we're using this, not just as a standalone product, as a standalone solution, but as an integration to the Microsoft 365 Defender suite of or umbrella product of solutions that helps better protect us and correlates a lot of this information to give us a better overall picture of threats or risks to our environment. So finally, I wanted to just jump across to security.microsoft.com and very quickly show you how this information feeds in to the overall Microsoft 365 Defender Security Center. So the things we looked at in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, my threat analytics, vulnerability management, the partner APIs, you remember, the configuration management components, my device inventory, all of those things are available through advanced hunting as well, available through the Security Center. So the benefit here is I get the telemetry from other solutions and an overall view of how I'm tracking across identity, devices, and apps, and how I can improve my score. So the same secure score component that we saw in Defender for Identity, but for Defender 365. And we can filter on that again if we wanted to drill down specifically to a different category, a specific type of category, or a specific product. So I hope that's given you a better view of what Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is and how it can help you to be more secure. And that's the whole point here, is to more easily keep track of how secure your environment is and to improve your environment to avoid security incidents, as well as knowing when they occur. I also just want to mention that what you saw here today is part of Jasco's Tier 2 Limitless Security offering. If you're interested in that, please let us know. Visit our website at www.jasco.net.au and have a look at our offerings. Stay tuned though for upcoming vlogs. I'm going to be doing some more of these on the other Microsoft 365 Defender solutions. I hope this was of value for you today. And as always, please stay secure.